Hello guys, and welcome back to another cold episode. On today's episode, as we jump into a new format with the release of Tenpai and Ritual Beast, which is kind of impressive, we're going to be taking a look at the best cards to utilize for both board breaking and hand traps, and just the best staples to kind of throw into your deck to prepare yourself for the new metagame. Now, I don't have any like floodgates or anything like that on here, besides I guess Shifter, right? But what I will say about that is, like, for the most part, if you can play it, there is some merit to playing it, especially right now. I think floodgates like anti-spell and stuff like that are significantly better if you yourself or your deck can utilize them. So that's just like my overall thoughts on floodgates. I think they're a little bit better right now due to the fact that there's a lot of Tenpai, and Tenpai forces you to go first. So you're even more likely to go first. So playing those individual cards that are just for going first do get a little better, and you'll see that as we go through this. But yeah, we're just going to go through. We have lots of hand traps and board breakers. It's not everything. If I miss something, I can't get them all, but I'll try my best. Now, this is just for the overall metagame and kind of with the whole meta in mind. Now, I have done a tier list on what is basically top tier, so there you go. You could go watch that other video if you really want to know. But yeah, pretty much top tier decks are like Yugioh, Tenpai, Labyrinth. Snake Eye is still pretty top tier, Tier Lament, stuff like that. So anyway, let's just hop right into this. Starting off with Change of Heart, and I'm gonna just put all of these like steel style effects into good. They're not great. They're not exceptional options. You could potentially use them within Tenpai as a way to kind of break boards, but I think there are definitely better options when it comes to Tenpai itself. However, there's also other decks as well that could utilize this, like Makonko and the like. However, if you're playing Makonko right now, maybe don't. You could also play them in like Sky Striker, right? They're pretty good in Sky Striker. Snatch Steal less so. I think Snatch Steal is probably the worst of these. I think Change of Heart is actually pretty good right now. But then you also have something like Triple Tack that's just like objectively better for most situations. So it's kind of like a hit or miss. So you could definitely consider them, but they're not all that great. Next up, we have Cosmic Cyclone. I think Cosmic Cyclone is pretty good, both for going first and for going second. One of the main reasons that it's so good as of right now, even though it's not like the best option and something that you want to auto-include into your deck, but is definitely something that you should be realistically thinking about adding or putting into your deck, is the fact that a lot of top decks right now are playing like a field spell or like a continuous spell or something along those lines that is going to be very that they're going to be like very, very hindered by having their spell just banished, right? Most notably, obviously, Tenpai, right? Being able to hit the Song and Summoning in order to allow you to basically interact with the opponent's board is very nice. So yeah, Cosmic's pretty good. Next up, we have Dark Hole. Dark Hole is just another board breaker with things like Raigeki as well for Tenpai. It's pretty much just a Tenpai card. I think at the moment, though, not really all that great. They're okay. They're just kind of additional ways to break boards, but they're not too impactful. Dark Ruler, I think, is just not necessarily worth it all that much. I feel like right now you definitely need something that you can use either going first or going second. If you are going to be teching in something that's not for like Tenpai or like Tenpai OTK, you need something that's like, you know, a settable quick play like Droplet or something along those lines, or something that's like a big blowout, which Dark Ruler is technically. However, it doesn't necessarily remove any of the cards from the field, and I think that's where a lot of the issue stems from, because the boards that you're probably going to go up against are either not very monster heavy, so having something that just like removes a bunch of monster effects isn't going to really be all that impactful, or it's something like Yubel, where it's like, cool, you now prevented them from like activating any of the effects, but they can also just, like, be annoying to out themselves, because if they have the Yubel monsters, then it becomes a bit of an issue. And also, like, what are you going to run it in? Tenpai? Yeah, probably not, right? So it's just not really all that valuable. However, on the other hand, Droplet is fantastic right now. You can play this in pretty much any of your decks because, one, it allows you to interact in the battle phase. And more specifically, in damage calculation / damage step, which means that you can interact favorably with things like Chundra or Pydra or any of those cards from Tenpai, while also being able to break boards from like Yubel or Tearlament or Snake Eye or something along those lines. So with that in mind, I think it is one of the best options for the current metagame, and should probably be going in most of your decks, unless your deck really doesn't want to go and like send cards to the graveyard, or yeah, that's pretty much it. If you're playing Kashtira, maybe you don't play this, but even then you might, because it's that good. Econ I don't think is terrible. Even having the ability to just like switch a guy to defense position is honestly kind of good. If you can like force your opponent to basically be on one Chundra and then like go to the battle phase and you just switch it sideways, it's pretty good. It also has the ability to tribute to steel, which is very useful, especially if you're expecting like a mirror match. Yeah, there's a lot of like little things that makes it pretty good. Being able to dodge like targeted effects with the amount of like hand traps that are running around, that's also pretty good. So yeah, lots of value for it. I don't think it's that great, but I do think it is pretty good. Honestly, I should probably just put this here. I don't think it's as good, but I do think that it is definitely something worth considering and is slightly above some of the other steel effects. Book of Eclipse is also kind of funny, because the thing with Book of Eclipse is that it has the ability to, first of all, you don't have to target, but second of all, being able to like flip everything face down for a turn is very nice. And there's not a whole lot of spell trap card interaction right now, so having just a thing that's like, cool, I'm not going to deal with any of those. I like quick effect speed specifically, that also allows you to dodge effects yourself. It's pretty nice. Again, I don't think it's all that great, but it is something of note. Xia Import's not very good. Evenly's a good card. It's a nice staple card. It's especially good in best of ones, as just like a way to go second and to like break boards efficiently. Obviously you're not going to play it in like Tenpai, but for the most part it's okay. It's still a decently good card, and Evenly Match is such a like blowout of a card that it's hard for me to really put it all that low. It's fine. Harpy's Feather Duster, I think, is honestly one of the best cards right now in Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel in the current metagame, mostly due to the fact that, well, for two reasons. One, things like Yubel or Snake Eye or Tearlament are all playing a whole bunch of back row right now, which means if you're playing into them going second, it is pretty nice to have some sort of back row removal, which is where Harpy's Feather Duster and Heavy Storm, to a similar degree, fit in. I think that both of those really help facilitate OTKs, or just like advantages, really heavily. On top of that, if you're playing Tenpai, having back row removal is important. So yeah, Harpy's Feather Duster and Lightning Storm by association are very, very good. Lava Golem's just not really good right now, mostly due to the fact that pretty much everything requires a normal summon right now, and there's not really a good deck that can give up their normal summon effectively. You could technically give up your normal summon in Labyrinth. The problem with that is that because of Tenpai, right? If you end up going first and drawing a Lava Golem, it's not great, right? So sure, Lava Golem's like pretty good into like Yubel and stuff like that, but I think you're just better off just setting a whole bunch of traps against that deck and hoping and praying that you don't see Tearlament. But yeah, for the most part, I feel like Lava Golem's just not all that worthwhile right now. I don't, other than like Lab, there's not really a deck that really wants to utilize this. Maybe you could play it in like Tearlament, but I don't know why you would. I don't know what deck necessarily you'd be worried about, especially with no Ibly lock and stuff like that. Yeah, I think things like Yubel are less worrying. So there's that. Now, with that being said, if you were to consider something, I think instead of Lava Golem, Sphere Mode might be a little bit better, mostly due to the fact that if you are going to try to tribute over an opponent's board, you're probably better off tributing 3 things instead of just 2, because most boards, there's like 3 guys that you'd want to out, right? And again, the only thing that you would realistically play this in is like lab. So, it's not terrible. I wouldn't necessarily say, you know what, I lied. No, just don't. I don't think it's necessarily all that great. Mostly due to how prominent Tenpai and some of these other decks are. Also, I haven't talked at all about Ritual Beast. The thing with Ritual Beast is that a lot of this stuff as well does do fairly well into Ritual Beast. You know, they do have some back row. Most notable, Steeds is very impactful, right? Sometimes they can set up an Omni Negate, sometimes they can't. But like Cosmic Cyclone doesn't do very well against them, and a lot of this other stuff as well. Maybe like Dark Ruler would be pretty good against them, but at that point you've probably already been fire locked, and then you can't Tenpai OTK, and then you're sad. So, anyway, speaking of which, Imperm's crazy right now. Not only is it a good board breaker, it's also a good hand trap, which makes it doubly powerful. So yeah, it's just like one of the best options. It's always one of the best options. It's an insanely powerful card and is really, really just solid. Individual kaijus, I think, are okay. They don't take up your normal summon, which is the biggest boon to them. But even with that being said, they're not really going to do all that much. Like, the best that you're going to do is, like, tribute over a phantom, which is pretty nice, because then it puts it into the grave, and then they can't really recycle that resource very effectively. But other than that, it's not really all that useful. It's okay. Divacarnate is just not really all that worthwhile running. Again, for very similar reasons. You could potentially play this in, like, Tenpai, again. But I think there are just better options holistically. So yeah, similar to how like, oh, maybe like one deck is gonna play Lava Golem and Sphere Mode. I think only Tenpai would realistically play the Divacarnate. Lightning Storm is crazy right now. In Tenpai specifically. I'm gonna put this in here, mostly for Tenpai, because of the fact that, yeah, having a board breaker that is able to hit both spells, is able to hit both back row and monsters. It's very, very useful. So, yeah, that's pretty much it. Book of Moon is just not really all that worthwhile right now. There's no real reason to play Book of Moon, I guess, unless you're playing Flunder and specifically need your monsters to not be negated by Imperm. That's kind of like the only reason. So yeah, for the most part, again, not really all that worthwhile. Pink, I don't think is too terrible. It's just like a solidly good card that forces a lot of interactions and is a big guy, which is kind of nice. So there's that. You also have, I think in Tenpai, I think it is a decently good option. I don't think you necessarily need to include it. I think there are definitely better options. But it's not necessarily a bad consideration for pretty much any of the decks. It hits a lot of important cards. Again, most notably those like spells and traps. Being able to interact with them at quick effect speed is very useful, right? Being able to hit like a Song and Summoning or what have you. Very nice off of that. And then on top of that, just being able to, you know, contest a board effectively is very nice. Also, notably, does hit Nightmare Pain, which is pretty nice. So, there's that. Next up, Fenris. Fenris is at 1. I don't necessarily think that it's a good staple card at just 1, but if you are considering the Kashtira package, I don't think it's necessarily terrible. Being able to, like, Kashtira Unicorn away, like, Bident Dragon or Transcendent Dragion is pretty good. So, yeah. Super Polymerization is actually pretty good right now, mostly due to the fact that there's a lot of good targets for it, right? Obviously, the Tenpais are Fire Dragons, so you can make a Garura or, well, Garura, which is pretty nice. But on top of that, you also have the ability to, like, fusion away some, like, Fiend Dark monsters with Yubel, or some Fire Pyro monsters with Snake Eye, or, well, maybe don't do Tearlament, but, like, overall, there's a lot more better targets as of right now, and, yeah, so it's solid. I don't think it's crazy, but it's okay. Triple Tack and Triple Tactics Thrust are interesting here. I think Triple Tactics Thrust is it's a solid card. We'll just put it in good. You can definitely play it. I don't think it's necessarily something that you're going to auto-include in your deck, but it is pretty good. And then I do think triple attack is actually just one of those things that you probably should be including, because you're more likely to actually have its effect go off going first, which sounds really weird because Tenpai is playing a lot of like board breakers as well, but they also are playing a lot of hand traps in particular, so you're more likely to get that first effect, and then it also is extremely helpful for going second as well. So that's pretty much it. Twin Twister is fine. It's good back row removal. There are better options like Cosmic. I think Cosmic's just a little bit better. Not having to discard is pretty nice. But then on top of that, you don't really need to hit 2 cards too often. It's helpful, but it's not something you necessarily need to do very often. Yeah, Ultimate Slayer's just not worth it, realistically. Ash is a mandatory card. Maxi is a mandatory card. We know. Also, Called By's not on here because it's not really a board breaker nor a hand trap, but it probably should be in, like, right here somewhere, because, you know, the Roach. We already talked about Imperm, sorry, I have it on here twice. Contacting Sea is actually kind of interesting. I think it is a fairly decent card, mostly due to the fact that if your opponent were to, like, do a thing, you could just be like, here you go, use that, which can really screw with, specifically Tenpai, right? You wait for them to go to, like, the battle phase, special summon a guy, and then you just go, here you go. Here's the thing, you now have to use it, and then they just can't, because there's not really a good, like, effective summon for them to go into. Oh, actually, I don't know if Chandra... Is Bident Dragon, or is Transcendent Dragon... It's not generic, right? Give me one sec. Okay, literally just checked. Transcendent Dragon is, in fact, does, in fact, require a Dragon Tuner. So, most of the level 10s are going to require those Dragon cards. Which means Contacting Sea is pretty decent. It is a level 6, which is what I was worried about. I was like, oh, you could just, like, use Chandra to synchro off. But, yeah, just being able to give this to your opponent is actually not that bad of an idea. It's a little bit of a gimmick because pretty much no other deck is really going to care too much about this, but it's really good against Tenpai, which is kind of funny. Anyway, next up we have DD Crow. DD Crow's... It's fine. It's not really great, though. I've seen some people use it for Tenpai to, like, banish the target of Fadra or something along those lines. The problem with that is it only in theory does it work, because in practice, if your opponent, like, for example, special summons off of the effect of Chandra, the Pydra, or not the Pydra, the Fadra, then you're just kind of, like, stuck not having the ability to do anything, right? So, yeah, DD Crow in theory is good. In practice, I don't think it's actually as good. So, there's that. This could also very well be the same idea with Contacting Sea, but I figured it would be an interesting take, so I'm going to put it up a little bit higher, because it's worth considering. I believe this is Delta, which I believe is the Trap Negate, which I think is the wrong one. But whatever one the spell one is for the Gamma, Delta, Epsilon, whatever it's called. You know what I'm talking about, right? The spell negate that requires driver. Honestly, it's not terrible, but it's not great. Gamma's actually pretty good right now. I don't think every deck should be using Gamma, but it is pretty powerful. Being able to specifically remove a card from the field is very nice. And you can utilize it to negate an effect on or in the hand that would activate, like, for example, a Chandra, and then destroy it, which means if your opponent, like, normal summons Pydra, searches out the field spell, activate the effect, search out Chandra, then activates its effect in order to special summon itself, and then you go, here's a Gamma, no. You could just cut them off of that very important resource, which is pretty nice. Obviously, you should probably hit the Pydra if they're searching the field spell, but you get the point. Droll, I think, is not, honestly, all that great right now, mostly due to the fact that the decks that would realistically be hit by this are, like, Yubel, and that's kind of it. There's not really a whole lot of decks that are going to be doing a whole lot of searching, right? Like, Tearlament could get hurt by Droll. Like, it's not terrible, right? Yubel, that's, fairly annoying against. But it's not like a turn skip like it normally would be, at least in, like, some metagames, right? Like, when Super Heavy Samurai was popular. So, for the most part, it's an okay card. It's not terrible, but I think that there are just, like, significantly better options. Lancia is... don't. Ghost Ogre is honestly... it's good. I think it's very, very good right now. Hitting Song and Summoning, hitting Nightmare Pain, hitting Barrier from Voiceless Voice, hitting a bunch of other stuff like that, as well as potentially hitting things like an Appaloosa or whatever it may be, is fairly good. But all things considered, it's not crazy. Ghost Mourner's fine. She's there. Targeted effect negation is never bad. Speaking of which, Effect Veiler is still pretty good. I'm just going to put it in good. Yeah, targeted effect negation is pretty solid, just across the board. Having the ability to do that. Also, Ghost Mourner is particularly interesting, mostly due to the fact that you're able to use it on things like a summoned Bident Dragon or something along those lines, because it is something that can activate in the battle phase. So that brings that up a little bit, but other than that, like, it's not crazy. There are, again, still better options, right? Like Imperm or Droplet. But you get the point. Ghost Bell I just don't think is all that good right now. There's not really many decks that would falter to a Ghost Bell. Obviously, like, Tier, maybe, but, like, the Bestials are better for that. I just realized I don't have the Bestials on here. Give me a sec. But we'll talk about Ghost Bell real quick. Yeah, Ghost Bell is... yeah, it's like Tier Lament, and that's pretty much it. There's not really a whole lot of decks that are going to care that much about the Ghost Bell. I guess, like, Fire King Snake Eye does care, right? A few other things. But I really don't think that they're something that you should be dedicating an entire hand trap to, when they could be pretty much anything else. So there's that. Speaking of Bestials, I do think that the Bestials are fairly good right now. Just being able to, like, put a body onto the field is fairly okay. Actually, yeah. They're also fairly decent into, like, Yubel and Voiceless Voice and some of those other decks as well, so they're okay. However, I do think that they are significantly weaker than they were in the previous metagame, so they're fine, but not insane. Not being able to specifically hit the Tenpai cards is kind of the biggest issue with them right now. Shifter is Shifter and will do Shifter things. Honestly, it's still good. It will always be good. It's definitely weaker now, but if you can play Shifter, you probably should be playing Shifter. It's still that good. Phantasme is honestly pretty bad right now. With Tenpai and, like, Ritual Beast and a bunch of these other decks running around, it's not really all that useful to be playing something that's so specifically dedicated to, like, Link hate. So, yeah, if, like, Fire King and Rescue Ace were the two most popular decks, then I'd be like, yeah, maybe. But at this point, I don't think it's really all that worthwhile. Nibiru is honestly not all that great. I think it's still worth considering just playing, like, one so that you don't die to, like, random shenanigans after you max C the opponent. But honestly, I don't even think it's worthwhile considering even playing it at 1 for, like, max C reasons. And the main reason for this is because it's really, really, really bad against Tenpai. And it's not even all that great against the other decks of the format, right? Like Yubel, like Voiceless Voice, like Tier Lament, or even Fire King Snake Eye. There's not really a whole lot of decks that really care too much about a Nibiru. So, yeah, for the most part, I don't think it's all that great of an option. However, never really not worth considering. Next up, we have Retaliating Sea, which is not good right now. Look, there's not enough branded to make that worthwhile. And then we have Red Reboot. Red Reboot is obscenely crazy. It is, like, max C levels of crazy in Tenpai. Pretty much the first 2 cards you should be putting into Tenpai, outside of, like, the actual Tenpai engine, are these two. And it's pretty much not close. Reason being, right? Think about how many trap cards decks just inherently play. Whether that's like a target that they search for, or whether that is imperm, or whether that is X, Y, or Z, right? There's a ton of different like random trap cards that will just show up, right? But then on top of that, if you're actually playing against any sort of actual back row deck, Red Reboot just immediately like wins you the game against a lot of those, right? For example, if you're playing against Labyrinth as Tenpai, and all of a sudden, you know, they set 5, and now you have to deal with that. Sure, you could draw the Harpy's Feather Duster, or the Lightning Storm, or what have you, but what if you don't? Or, more specifically, what if they draw Judgment? Well, now you have the answer to Judgment as well, and then you can play as if nothing happened. It's just a really, really solid card, and is incredibly powerful. I've even used that card against Tenpai itself to prevent an Imperm from resolving, so that I could just OTK them with my own Tenpai. So, yeah, if you're playing it in Tenpai, or if you're playing this card specifically, or if you're playing Tenpai specifically, you should be playing that card in Red Reboot, because it's insane. But yeah, that's going to be it for the list. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope that you guys did indeed enjoy it. If you did, like us very much, I'll appreciate it, and let me know what you guys think down below. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you think I misplaced something like Red Reboot? Let me know. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching, and remember to always stay frosty. Bye-bye. Shout out to the Frost Guard, my members. Thank you guys so much for the support, and I hope you enjoy the content.